Hello, my name is Simon Schutte. I'm a researcher at Liechtenstein University. I'm working within the field of Kansei Engineering or effective development, essentially putting feelings into products, putting the right feelings into products. And my background is engineering and product development. I've been working for Volvo Truck Corporation many years ago, and that is where my interest in effective engineering started. At that point, I was responsible for having a look how gearboxes behaved in trucks in the field, and we found out that many drivers were actually unhappy with the gearboxes which we delivered. Not that they didn't do their job, it was just like the gear shifting process was not as smooth as they would expect. And if you buy your own truck, if you're owning your truck, then you're extra sensitive to that. So what I found out then was that there was not only a functional need on products, there was also a need on the affective, on the experience of how machinery, how things would work. After that, I started researching a little bit into that and found out that there was a relatively new area of research called affective engineering, or in Japanese Kansei design or emotional engineering. There are different titles to it. And this is a description or an introduction into what is Kansei engineering, what is affective design, and I will give you a way how to tackle these types of problems and give you also a couple of examples. So stay tuned. So then let's go right into it. The whole presentation will take about 1.5 hours, and I'm very much aware that you probably will not look through this material straight through. So I decided to break the material into different parts and give you some timestamps in order to go into those parts which might be interesting for you. First, I will give you a short introduction, go then into Kansei Engineering and its technology, how that works, which methodologies we can use, give you some examples, and in the end, I will finish up with a couple of real-world examples, products which you already can buy on which are made with Kansei Engineering. So in the introduction, I will give you the disposition in a second. I will talk a little bit about the customer and the customer affective needs. Why does the customer behave like he or she is doing? And then I will exemplify that at a couple of lifestyle products, a little bit older products, because with a little bit of timely distance, it's easier to see why people do prefer this or that product. So you will see in a second. So firstly, we start with the disposition. So I will go through recent customer trends, what customers actually prefer, why they produce, why products are produced, and how does the customer needs actually change the products which are produced. I will go through this engineering of impressions part. I will talk about concepts and perspective there, and then, as I told you, go into Kansei Engineering. What is it? What is the Kansei? I will present you general concepts, methodologies, more or less an example of how you actually perform a study in Kansei Engineering, and how you actually can introduce your results into real product development. And finally, I will go through products which are on the market out. In order to understand the need for Kansei engineering and effective design, it's necessary to look back
maybe 100, 120 years. And also have a look on the term design for obsolescence. What's that? There are two dimensions in that. One is planned obsolescence, which means that a product you buy will eventually wear down, and it is deliberately designed that it will break, and you will have to buy a new one eventually. You would say, yes, of course, every product does it. Yes, but if you go back 120 years ago or 100 years ago, you would see that the products there were produced in order to hold forever, or at least be able to be repaired eventually. But for the company, of course, who is designing products that will break, this company will sell the same type of product to you several times in your lifetime. And this, of course, gives them more profit. But there's more to it. There's also the term perceived obsolescence, which means that even a product which is not broken needs to be replaced. Fashion is one of those examples. So the clothing you're wearing may be still intact. They are still doing the same functionality. You wear them. They keep you warm. You don't have to be ashamed. But on the other hand side, they are from last year or from the year before and look a bit dated. This is perceived obsolescence. And I think that many of you already have experience with more expensive products like a mobile phone. You probably have changed your mobile phone before, not because it was broken, but because it was outdated in some way. Software didn't work anymore, the design was obsolete, and so on. So with these two strategies, companies can sell the same product many times to you. And if we go back to the history, this is based on an idea that the managing director of General Motors had in the 1920s. He said that in competition to Ford, we have to get an edge. And how can we sell more cars, more products, even if the market becomes saturated? And one thing was, of course, building the cars in a way that they will break down eventually, deliberately. And also, they produced the cars in a way that they looked old. So they started introducing year models, meaning that every year the car got a slight facelift and looked slightly different. And that was something which made the car which you had bought last year looking old, and the car for which is 5 years old for sure is old. And this, of course, increases the urge of buying a new car. That was 100 years ago, but if we go on, this methodologies were perfected. And here we have another example. This is from the 1960s. It's a chair. You would say probably today, wow, it's a very nice chair. It's vintage, yes, but it actually fulfills both of the criteria for design for obsolescence. So planned obsolescence, it's plastic, and if you sit on it every day, frequently, it will break. It's plastic. That will break. It's a material problem. Also, it will be perceived as very old. Yeah, today it would be vintage, but at some time in the 1970s, it would just be rubbish and would be thrown away because it's just plastic and you just throw it away. That could be good in terms of we can sell new products and we can products better, and there will be an evolution of products. But on the other hand, we are running into problems with the environment. So we use a lot of materials which we have to source, which we have to produce, which we will use energy with, and then we have to dispose that. So design for obsolescence is something which maybe is obsolete today, and we need to find ways out of that eventually. But yeah, well, there are ways out of that, which is not really topic of this lecture, but for example, functional sales is one way out of it. Yeah, then have a look on customer behavior. And I would like to exemplify it at a product which everybody of you actually own, TV remote control, something like this. So how do you use it? Many people does use it exactly in the same way, switching on the set, switching off the set, altering the volume, changing the channel. These are 4 basic functions. Maybe even going into some type of settings or menu or something like that. But why does this thing have so many different buttons on it? The answer is feature creep. Feature creep is a phenomenon which has been starting in the 1970s, maybe a little earlier, and was going on until maybe 2010, maybe a little bit later on as well. Why? The thing is that if you're a producer of products, of TV sets in this case, you would like to attract new customers. This means that you have to be better or have to offer a different feature or having some type of unique selling point. And that can be done by actually adding a different feature which a competitor still does not have. This means, of course, if you have a new feature, you need a new button on that. So then let's jump to the 1970s. How did markets look like in the 1970s? Of course, very different to today's markets. Mass production prevailed. The same type of production was introduced after World War II. Products were very anonymous, looked very much alike, did however fulfill the customer's functional needs. You can see this TV remote control here. Boring stuff, on off volume, but that's about it. There is no more need to that. If we then go on 10 years later in the 1980s, maybe a little bit into the 1980s, we could see that some of the markets became saturated, which meant that we had more manufacturers than necessary. We had more different products than necessary, and suddenly the customers got a choice, which meant for the manufacturers that you had to stick out with their products or you would lose the market. That led in the product development methodology in a way to interview people, to get more customer oriented, to learn about who is the typical customer, what does he or she want, and incorporating those needs into product development became suddenly important. Still, we are on functional needs, just to find out what functions does customer want and how can we introduce them into products was the big thing in the 1980s. Also, we got other global players. Japanese companies suddenly entered the market. Japanese companies in the 1960s and 70s were very much like Chinese companies maybe today or maybe 5-6 years ago. They were relatively unknown, but were producing low quality products to a very competitive price. In the 1980s, this was about to change and went into the 1990s, where Japanese products suddenly became very good quality. Still, the brand name or the brands didn't have a good sound to the customers yet. So Japanese companies actually worked very hard to improve quality. At the same time, they were working with customer satisfaction, improving customer satisfaction, and in this way, they got some type of good reputation. This trend, of course, continued into the new millennium. Here we could see more products, more customer focus, and new methodologies in customer focus. For example, co-creational processes. So let the customer be part of the product creation. Let the customer be able to make the product their own. And if you have a look here on the TV controls, here we had one from the 1980s and then 1990s, beginning of the new millennium, then led into this. This is the remote control for an Apple TV. So what you can see there, that hedonic trends became prevalent. Hedonic trends means that the customer is not only interested in the fact that the product actually fulfills a certain function, but it should do it in style, so to speak. Make things easier, make things more attractive to customers. What you can see that the Apple TV control looks very different to the control from the end 1990s. Here we still have a lot of buttons. Each of the buttons actually fulfill one functionality, or should at least. Here in the Apple TV, we could see the introduction of menus, something which is so normal to us now, so everyday to us now, was a revolutionary thing in the beginning of the 2010s around that. These trends, of course, continued until today, and we can see that there are more methodology, there are more tools for more branches and more different industries for actually being able to handle these trends and also offering better products with more hedonic features to the customers. I want to give you an example of lifestyle products and how to build a lifestyle products brand. Um, this These examples are a little bit older. They are from around 2010, and there's a good reason to this. If you have a little bit of timely perspective, it's easier for us to see the difference and how things worked at that time. Anyhow, Japanese companies are usually quite good in building new brands in a way that they transfer some type of Kansei or some type of affective impression. So these products, which you can see here, were sold under the name of Will. This was the brand name, and they had this core emotions or core values where you have cool, creative, emotion, and relax. What does it mean? Yeah, well, firstly, they were trying to target persons who were young in their career, people who were moving out from their parents' home, people who had the need of identifying themselves to a certain professional pattern, also to refer themselves to a certain, how to put it, society or point of society in some way. So what they said that for those persons, they produce products which were rather price worthy on the lower price segment, but with quite good quality. And what you can see here is that the range of products ranges from cars to furniture to food, like ice cream and beer here, but also detergents, computers, stationery, everyday needs in some way. So by purchasing that, this person would identify themselves towards this core values and would identify themselves as young, successful professional, being self-sufficient, and so on, all those things. In some way, this is done on other markets as well, in other cultural context as well. So if we go to a Western context, I think it's easy to see that somebody who purchases a certain car or a certain mobile phone or wears a certain type of outfit identifies herself or himself as belonging to a certain group. Maybe you should think a little bit of how you are doing personally. Who are you? What products do you buy and why do you do this? Uh, I would bet that many of the products which you're buying, which you are using, are not only fulfilling functional needs, but I would even guess that most of them are fulfilling foremost a hedonic need or a need for effect, for your effects, and then in the second place some type of functional need. Of course, it's not an easy task to build brands like that, to target your customer, to know what he or she wants, what he or she is dreaming of, and so on. In many cases, you can't not even just go through these persons and ask them, what do you want? Because these persons are having these needs in some way unconscious. It's beyond the surface. It's very difficult even for themselves to access and to express what they want themselves. So that's why Japanese researchers came up to something what they call the Kansei. And that is the second part of my presentation here. I will go through and explain what the Kansei is. Why do we use the Japanese term Kansei? Why are there no good translations? And how can the Kansei be described or even measured?